Okay, shalom, my dear friends.
Shalom.
We are back, and Michael's not here. He told me that this is complicated, so I'll just try my best, guys. Nightly dedication in honor of the Azan family from Flatbush, New York. The tragic deaths of Moshe 11, Yitzchak 7, Henyetel 3. Also dedicated memory of Rabbi Yehuda Leib Steinman, their 40-year-old mother, Eliza Azan, who were burned to death at their home. In merit of Refuah Shlema of Shilat Bas Luisa, Eliza, 16, Daniel ben Luisa, Eliza, 15, Avram ben Luisa, Eliza, 13, their father Yosef ben Ahuva Masuda. Nightly sponsor in honor of Rachel Miriam Bat Haraleya by her loving husband, in honor of her birthday because she is my lighthouse in this world, for her Hatzlacha, health, patience towards me and beautiful kids, donated anonymously, and for the Refuah Shlema of Menachem Mendel ben Sarah Batya and Devorah Fega Bat Rezo. Sabrina Carfel, in memory of Barry and Honey Sherman from Toronto, passed away last Friday, leaving behind 4 kids. May their neshamas have an aliyah. Anonymous, Dina, Dornbush, Azari family. Okay, I think that's what we have here. Also, on my own note, I would like to also dedicate this class in great gratitude to Hashem. Today, Shalom Mordcha Rubashkin was released from prison, so returned to his family. Very big simcha. So we want to also dedicate this class for the recovery of his family. It's been many years in all for recovery of him and his family together, to be freed from all details and to be able to live a free and joyous life. Okay. I'm sorry? Batya Batsluba. Okay. For Shlema. Okay, so today's modern issue to be dealt with, as you know, from this platform, we're always taking a mystical teaching, and the bottom line is always to bring home a modern day issue which we can better deal with life. So today's modern day issue is letting go of the pain of the past. In life, there are ups and downs, sweet moments, painful moments, and all of this is perfectly normal for the person that lives in the present. A present undictated by his past. However, all too often this isn't the case. A bit shy of 2 decades ago, a lawyer by the name of Peter approached me. I was in Fort Lauderdale at the time, and he shared with me that he was representing a woman against the insurance company. I just want to share with you in short what was going on there. This woman had a very rare neurological disease in which the neurology was not letting go of the accident. And for some reason it kept on triggering off as if the accident just happened. So she was continuously living in the pain of the impact of the accident. Whatever, insurance goes on to claim that we don't cover that, that's not the norm, that's not what we signed up, or whatever. But that's not the point right now, what happened with that case. The point is that all too often, many of us live that way. Albeit we don't live that way physically, neurologically, but we live that way emotionally. We live that way intellectually, where the painful past never gets let to recede into the past. And rather it's controlling our emotion and our perception and our paradigm of the present and of the future. So that's really the difficulty of what we're going on here, where when we're living in the way the past is dictating our emotional and our paradigm and our perception of reality in the present, we're living stuck in the past. We're experiencing today through yesterday's pain, and that's being stuck. So in this lecture, based upon a teaching of the Rebbe, actually the Rebbe delivered this mimer, this Hasidic discourse in 1988 on this week's Parsha concerning Joseph and his brother Judah, You know how the Torah portion starts. We'll see that in a moment. Judah approaches Joseph. We will learn how to liberate ourselves from replaying the pain of our past over and over again. So that's the modern day issue that, wow, be amazed at how many of us are always stuck there. We're stuck in yesterday. Today we know we're not only stuck from our own experiences, we're actually stuck in generational experiences, which is what drove my epiphany moment, for those of you that follow my epiphany moments every day. Existential guilt comes to the offsprings of survivors genetically, and something that needs to be dealt with. So living in the past is a very real challenge that we have. Okay, let's do some introductions with this week's Torah portion. So how does this Torah portion begin? It begins with the opening verse that Judah approaches Joseph, not knowing that he's Joseph, of course. So let's go back to last week's Torah portion. Last week's Torah portion closes with the messenger of Joseph chasing down the brothers, and 11 brothers at this point, because Benjamin was with them. And surprisingly enough, we actually found, I did the best I can on the dedications. Okay? So anyway, what happens here is that he had the person hide his private silver goblet in Benjamin's backpack. And then he sends the guy to track it down and find who stole the silver goblet, right? Judah sees what happens, and what does Judah immediately do? Judah immediately says, we're guilty. I mean, you found it with us. There's nothing we can do. However, he's a young boy. So he'll go back home, and I'll stay as your servant to pay for the theft. And he says, no, you'll go back home, and he who is guilty shall pay for the theft. He'll stay here as my slave. Now, Judah being the one that took responsibility for Benjamin, he promised Jacob, and our sages learn off in the words, he promised Jacob in this world and in the world to come, he will be the collateral to bring back Benjamin safely to his father. So he's the one that approaches. Vayigish alav Yehuda, Judah approaches Joseph, and he starts talking to him. The outcome of that is, V'leyochel is apik. Joseph can't contain himself no more. He tells everyone, get out. I need to talk privately to this people. And reveals to them that he's his brother. Okay? So that's what's going on over there. Now, okay? Another thing we need to know is that the Haftorah for this week's Torah portion, they chose the portion from Ezekiel, which talks about the prophecy in which he's told to take a branch which represents Ephraim, the younger child of Joseph, and to take a branch which represents Judah, to bring them together as one and make them one. Now, the simple connection between the Haftorah and the Torah portion is precisely the opening verse. Judah approaches Joseph. And then in the Haftorah you have the two branches, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of David will be brought together. Okay? Now there's a couple of interesting questions here. Because in the Torah portion, who's king? Joseph. Who approaches him? Judah. And after Judah approaches him, who remains king? Joseph. Let's talk about the Haftorah. What does it say later on in the verse? Va'avdi David, and my servant David will be king upon them. So the difference is that in the Haftorah, we see that it's Judah that's the king. The Davidic dynasty comes from the family of Judah. While in the Torah portion, it's Joseph that's king over Judah. So we need to understand what that is all about, okay? And in order to understand this, we're going to have to explore what Judah and Joseph exactly mean on the global level in the service of God, and what they mean within us, in our individual. Each and every individual has within them the Joseph and the Judah, which also means that within each and every individual there is the service of Joseph and the service of Judah. When we get this straight, we'll understand the lack of congruency between the story of the Torah portion and the story of the Haftorah and how it deals with us. Okay, so for this to happen, we're gonna, as always, discuss some mystical concepts, some mystical introductions. And today, usually we have 5, 6, 7. Today we only have 3. Taking it easy after all the latkes. Can't get too mystical on a full stomach of latkes, right? So let's do this. Number 1, study versus action. Number 2, prayer versus redemption. Number 3, what humility does to our past. Okay? Let's dive right in. On a global level, the difference between Judah and Joseph is the difference between action and study. So let's just talk about it practically, okay? Judah, what does it say about Judah in Chronicles? Yehuda Govar, he strengthened, actually the exact translation is, Judah prevailed over his brothers, which speaks about the strength in action. What is Judah blessed with by Jacob? What is Judah blessed with by Moses? They're blessed with monarchy. What's the job of a king? To dictate course of action, laws of action. So Judah is all about action. Now let's talk about Joseph. What does Joseph mean? Joseph is all about growth. The very word Yosef. Why did Rachel call him Yosef? Yosef li Hashem ben Acher. May God grant me yet another child. Yosef means growth. Not only that, even the Haftorah, when we focus more specifically within Yosef himself on his younger child, Ephraim, what does the word Ephraim mean? So you remember that the Torah portion last week told us why Joseph named his first son Menashe and his second son Ephraim. Menashe comes from the word Nishani, for God has taken me from my father's home. I don't forget my father's home. But what does the word Ephraim mean? It comes from the word Hifrani. He made me grow. He made me multiply in the land of my affliction. So once again, Ephraim from the word Ephrani means growth. In the global service to God, where do we experience growth? We experience growth in Torah study. Not so much in mitzvot observance. Why? Because when we talk about growth, we're not just talking about I learn more today, I learn more tomorrow, I learn more the day after, and that's my growth, my spiritual growth, my growth in knowledge. That's not what we're really talking about. Because that also happens in action. I do more mitzvahs. I grow in my mitzvahs. I grow in the spirituality of my mitzvahs. Rather, when we talk about growth in Torah study, we're speaking specifically of a very unique commandment that we have when we study Torah. When we study Torah, what are we taught to do? When we study Torah, we are specifically taught that one must extrapolate and come up with new insights. So yes, on one hand, we're taught very clearly in the Talmud that any new insight that a student will extrapolate was already included within what Moses received at Mount Sinai. And there's different interpretations how that works. But we're commanded that we should come up with our own insights, to reveal, to uncover, to extrapolate. So the definition of growth is not just in the human being, but the very growth of Torah study happens when more and more people study Torah. This guy comes up with this insight. This guy comes up with this insight. And of course, you have to always put it to the challenge of truth. If you find a contradiction in the Torah, so that goes out the window. But if there's no contradiction, everyone has the merit. It's a big merit for you to be the one to reveal your brushstroke in the knowledge of Torah, which remains hidden until you reveal it. Thus you have so many chidushim, new thoughts from the word chadash. So growth is Torah study, and action is Yehuda. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and see what happens here. When we have Judah approaching Joseph in the Torah portion, and when we bring together Judah and Joseph, the Ephraim, which is the offspring of Joseph, the two kingdoms as one, what happens here? What happens here is that there must be an elevation in each of them. Judah brings an elevation to the Joseph experience, and Joseph must bring an elevation to the Judah experience. In other words, action brings new elevation to Torah study, And Torah study brings new elevation to actions. Action means mitzvah observance, right? That's what we're talking about here. Good deeds, actions of good deeds. Let's see how that works. So number one, there's an amazing teaching that was taught by the fifth Luvabitcher Rebbe, and one of his most famous theses in Chassidus is my Morim discourses. I don't know if to use the word theses on a Rebbe. So Chassidic discourses that went on for, to Samach Vav, it went on for 2.5 years. So over there, he talks about the uniqueness when you study Torah, not for the sake of knowledge and spiritual growth, in as much as for the sake of knowing what to do and what not to do. Asher sasum, asher lo sasum. You need to know what to do and what not to do. How are you going to know what to do and what not to do if you don't learn Torah? You don't learn the code of Jewish law. So he explains that when someone is studying Torah to know what God wants him to do and what God prohibits him or her to do, the study takes on a total new dimension. Why? Because when you want to know what to do and what not to do, you're playing with fire. So really, you put your own egocentric intellects aside and you humbly ask for only one thing. May I know the will of God. May I uncover the will of God. The worst nightmare for someone that studies on that level is to realize that he made a mistake, and because of that, either he or someone else did the wrong thing. Because when the Torah focus is filled on, when the Torah study is focused on fulfilling the will of God and not transgressing the will of God, that's all you want. So I don't need the great powers of my mind to come up with an insight. Leave alone the insights right now. It's do or die. What does God want me to do? What does God prohibit me to do? Thus you see, when the focus is on action, that brings an elevation within the Torah study. The same thing happens, the elevation that Torah study brings when you're focused on the action. It's both ways. So there's an elevation in the Torah study when it's about the action. There's an elevation in the action through Torah study. Why? Because when you're studying Torah, and you're studying Torah to know what to do, and thus you're uncovering the reasons, you're uncovering the details, you're uncovering the extrapolations, your doing is filled with a whole different feeling. You know, I'm going to share with you off notes, off track for a moment. You know, I rebelled against this whole bar mitzvah and bas mitzvah classes when people brought their children to me. Yeah, we had to do that Torah. Okay, fine. But I want to tell you what I used to do. What I used to do is give the students, I'm just telling you what we used to do because I just didn't have a mitzvah class of recent. I would start off with giving them a paper and a pen, and I told them that you just landed in Cambodia and you need to build a shul. Can you make a list for me of what you need for the shul? And the boy or the girl would walk around the shul and write down things, and I would correct them what they're writing. The memorial board, no, you don't need a memorial board. This or that. We would go through everything. When they finished writing down that list, we would organize it in a certain order, and that became the syllabus of their entire bar mitzvah class. Purpose of doing that? What is the purpose of, instead of teaching them the traditional stuff, to make them make a list of every item in the shul? Because after that, I work through every item, and then when I get to the calendar, we work through all the holidays. Explain the shofar, explain the menorah, explain the sukkah. Very prime thing. When we get to Siddur, I actually break down the prayer for them. When we get to the Chumash, the Torah. And the goal is just one goal. The goal is what you don't know, you're afraid of, and you definitely lack emotional connection with. So therefore the goal is, if you teach the bar mitzvah boy or the bat mitzvah boy what's going on, why are they standing by this prayer? Why are they sitting by this prayer? Why are we taking the Torah out now? Why all that stuff? If they can look around the shul and be able to understand their emotional experience and they're wanting to come back rather than not wanting to feel stupid by not coming back, that's what grows. So ultimately speaking, Joseph elevates Judah. Because the more you understand, the more you're emotionally involved and connected with what you're doing. Therefore, Judah and Joseph, when they're brought together, which is what this is all about in the opening of the Torah portion, and Judah approaches Joseph in the Haftorah, Ezekiel talks about God telling him to bring the two branches of Joseph and Judah together. That's what we're talking about. The grafting of the growth of Torah study together with the actions that we do affects both of them to the benefit. Okay? So now we need to talk about, if so, what's going on with, in the Torah portion, Joseph is king. In the Haftorah, Judah is king. To understand this, we need to go to a ruling in the Talmud, which is mentioned both in the Tractate of Kedushin and in the Tractate of Baba Kama. And I'll actually read it to you. I actually copy-pasted it. It's a very interesting how the wording here is quite interesting. Okay. Let's go ahead. Where is this? So, there's a question here. Rabbi Tarfon and the elders were once reclining in the upper story of Nitza's house. They were in the attic of Nitza's house in Lida. When the question was raised before them, is study greater or practice? Rabbi Tarfon answered saying, practice is greater. Rabbi Akiva answered saying, study is greater, for it leads to practice. Then they all answered and said, study is greater, for it leads to action. Okay? So here you had a question. Talmud Gadol or Maaseh Gadol? Talmud, study, learning is greater, or action is greater? Maaseh. So we had Rabbi Tarfon's opinion, which says action. Then Rabbi Akiva responds, not so, study. And then what ends up happening, everyone right then and there ruled that Rabbi Akiva is right. Greater is study that brings to action. Okay? But here's the interesting part. So in the Torah portion, who's king? Joseph. What is Joseph? Torah study. He's greater, and Judah humbly approaches him. In the Haftorah, who's greater? In the Haftorah is greater? Judah. He ends up being the king. So let's see how this works. In the times of exile, there is no greater unification that a person can have with God than through Torah study. Why so? Because when you do an action of a mitzvah, God's hugging you. When you're studying Torah, our sages tell us it's a double hug. God is hugging you and you're hugging God. What does that mean? That means commandments are the will of God. When I put on tefillin, did anything happen to my hand? The answer is no. Did my hand absorb anything? The answer is no. The will of God encompassed my hand. When I studied Torah, my brain literally changed. We know that it changed. From the neural paths, the weight of the brain. That means that I'm internalizing, I'm digesting Torah. So Torah study doesn't just have God hugging me, it has me, so to speak, digesting God. To the point where what are we taught? We're taught that digesting literally means that the food you eat becomes your blood and flesh. So too it is when you study Torah. It actually makes a change in your brain, which makes a change in your neural pathways, which makes a change in all the cells of your body. Thus, in exile, we follow the ruling that study is greater. There's no way to get closer to God, one with God, than by studying, digesting the Word of God. Action is important. Action overrules study. Because when you're studying Torah and you have to do a mitzvah, you have to stop studying Torah and do the mitzvah. Unless you can send someone else to do it. So the Alter Rebbe in Tanya explains why. The unity of Torah study is greater than the unity of doing action. But the soul came down here to do physical actions. It was studying Torah up there in paradise. So it's coming here for a mission. We have to do the mission. But when you talk about becoming one with God, There is no way to become one with God as a physical human being greater than intellectually digesting the Word of God, the will of God, the wisdom of God. Thus, we're taught, Rabbi Akiva says, study is greater. No. If so, how come the Torah talks about Judah being greater? Judah is the king. The Avdi David, my servant David from the house of Judah, not from the house of Ephraim, which is the son of Joseph. The answer is that when Mashiach comes, that's what we're talking about in the book of in the prophets, in the Torah of Ezekiel, action will be greater than study Torah. Why? If Torah study is the ultimate unity, then why? So to understand this, we need to understand one of the major things that we're taught. When Mashiach comes, we're taught something very unique. There's going to be the resurrection, right? But what is it about the resurrection that's special? What's special is that the souls that were laying in paradise, absorbing the bliss and the knowledge of God, are going to leave paradise, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which are 4,000 years in paradise, going from one level to another level in spiritual growth and in understanding Torah and becoming one with God. They're going to leave that and come back here. Why? This has to do with the class we had previously. Spirituality comes from the light of God. Physical cannot come from the light of God. You cannot have darkness come from light. You cannot have physical come from spiritual. Thus, the physical comes from the essence of God. The resurrection has a very unique twist to it. You and I all know that our body is alive only because the soul is in our body, and our body nurtures life from our soul. When the soul leaves the body dies. When Mashiach comes, the soul will be coming to receive life from the body. Why? Because until Mashiach comes, we're only dealing with the infinite light, i.e. the spirituality of the soul. When Mashiach comes, we're going to get beyond the light, the infinite light, and connect with the essence. Connecting with the essence is through the physical. Thus the soul will live off the body and not vice versa, and thus physical action will be the unity with the essence of God. When you study Torah and you understand what you're studying, so I did not see that the Rebbe said this. I did not see it in writing, nor did I hear it from the Rebbe. But I was told that the Rebbe once said, any God that I can understand can't be my God. By simple mathematics. If I can understand him, to know him is to be him. If I can understand him, he's not greater than me. He's not infinitely greater than me. Thus you understand that anything that I can understand of God is not the essence of God. It's the expressions of God's light. As infinite as it may be, expression is finite. Light is finite. Thus when Mashiach comes, says Ezekiel, there's going to be a switch. The action will be greater. By the way, if you listen carefully to what Rabbi Akiva said, there's a very tricky twist there. Greater is study because it brings to action. So the only reason study is great is because it brings to action. So who's really greater? But that won't be revealed until Mashiach comes. Because we're not possible right now to unite with the essence. Thus, when we talk about becoming one with God, it's through the study of Torah. When Mashiach comes, as we'll soon see, it will be revealed that ultimately speaking, the greatness of the Torah is that it empowers us to do the action. And the action is the essence connection, while the Torah is the revelation connection. Okay? That's on the global level where we talk about Joseph, growth is Torah study. Judah, monarchy, is action. Okay? Now let's talk about how it is individually within us. Individually within us, it gets a little different. We're talking about prayer versus redemption. Okay? So let's talk about this. When we talk about Judah, why was Judah named Judah? You look in Genesis, and what does it say there? Leah had Reuven, Leah had Shimon, Leah had Levi, and then Leah had Judah. And for each time she gave a name, she explained why she's giving the name. Reuven, from the word Re'eh, God has seen my affliction. I'm the unloved wife. Shimon, from the word Shema, God has heard my suffering. Levi, Hapam Yelava Alai, now my husband will want me because I brought my quota of children. There's going to be 12 kids. They were all prophetesses. They knew that there was going to be 4 wives. That's 3 per wife. And then all of a sudden, she's granted a 4th child. Now what does she say? Apam oida. What does oida mean? I will give thanks. Oida, Yehuda, the same word. Thus she called this offspring, this son, Yehuda. What does it mean to give thanks? To give thanks is to be able to have humility and acceptance. You give a person, he wins the lottery, $269 million, but his sense of entitlement says, that's it? And the government's taking half? And then the rabbi wants 20%? So gratitude comes with humility. If you don't have humility, there's nothing you'll ever be grateful for. And that comes with acceptance. Now, where is that experience in the service? Prayer. We'll soon see. Now let's talk about Joseph. What is Joseph? Joseph is about redemption. Why? Redemption mystically means what? Revelation. It's light or dark. When you're in a dark situation, you're disconnected from God, that's exile. When you stand in the light of God, that's revelation, that's redemption. Why is that growth? Because the whole concept of redemption is to overcome, to win the war. I want to be more detailed about this. When we talk about Judah being gratitude and acceptance, you and I both know what it means. Whether we have gratitude or sense of entitlement. Whether we have humility or we feel that we were done wrong. What exactly does redemption mean? What does it mean? So I just want you to know that in the world of Hasidus, redemption means an emotional relationship with God. When a person is able to experience love and fear, i.e. awe, for God, they're in a state of revelation. When they're not capable to emotionally connect with God, they're in a state of exile. So much so that famous story with Elisha and the prophets, where she cries out to Elisha, I owe money, they're taking my son's prisoner. Mystically speaking, taking my son's prisoner means that the egocentric world is taking my emotions of love and fear. I would like to have a theological, theocentric emotions, but I can't. I'm more afraid of poverty. I'm more afraid of sicknesses. I'm not afraid as much to cross the line with God. I love myself. I love fame. I love wealth. I love power. I don't feel that much of love for God. It's one or the other. Either I am the center of my emotions or God is the center of my emotions. Thus you understand, what does redemption mean? Redemption means that we waged a war. What war? The war over to whom our emotions will belong. The animalistic soul, i.e. egocentric, or the godly soul, i.e. theocentric. Thus the difference between Judah and Joseph is humility, acceptance, versus revealed feelings for God. Being able to conquer my emotions, that they be love and awe and fear for God. Now, so let's talk about what's going on here. In simple service, what does that mean? Prayer is about what? Prayer is about acceptance, about gratitude. Where does my love and emotion come from? Love and emotions, all emotions, love and fear, emotions are the offspring of the mind. Right? Very simple. You see something, it looks so great, You do a little bit of research, you find out that that is the highest cause for cancer. Do you still love it? Just very simple, right? The mind. If I know this person to be a good person, to elevate me, to have a good influence in my life, I will love the person. If it becomes revealed that that was all a cover-up, and really they're manipulative and using and really just a real horror in my life, that love instantly turns into what? Hate. So really love and feelings, all feelings are the offspring of perception, understanding, knowledge. Thus, what happens over here with Joseph? Once again, Joseph is growth. The growth of what? The redemption of emotions. How do you redeem your emotions? By creating knowledge, by understanding. He or she who tells me I love God, but I don't know God, doesn't love God. You can't love the unknown. He or she tells me I'm afraid of God, but I don't know God. Fear of the unknown is a fool's fear. Maybe there's nothing to be afraid of. So emotions is the offspring of understanding. Now in this specific case, I'm not talking about the Torah study of knowing the mitzvahs and the laws. I'm talking about even what Maimonides says. To study science is a way to love God. Because how do you know the strength of a man? By the rock he can lift. We don't get to directly study God and measure his biceps. But when you study science, you see that the wisdom of God, the love of God, the caring of God is infinite. And thus you start loving God. You realize that that infinite God has a relationship with you and every morning brings your soul back to you. You start loving God. Okay? Now let's talk about something else very interesting. Remember I told you the reason why Leah gave him the name Yehuda? Because of acceptance, gratitude. Gratitude is the experience of humility and acceptance. I want to tell you what the rest of the verse says. Vatamod meledet. Vatamod meledet means simply, and she stopped bearing children. She had these 4 and stopped. Later on she'll have more when she makes the deal with her sister, with the Jasmine. But for right now she stopped. What happens then? So there's a very interesting teaching. The word vatamod does not mean stop. Vatamod, you know from the word amidah. What does amidah mean? To stand. The amidah is called amidah because it's a standing prayer. I want to give you a little bit of an interesting mystical insight here. What does it say here? We're taught that she had Reuven is seeing. Seeing represents wisdom. Shimon is hearing. Hearing is represents understanding. Levi is connection. That represents knowledge, personalization. My God, not a God. I'm studying my God. It's all about knowledge, intellects. After that, she has Judah. What is Judah? Humility and acceptance. Teaches us, the Kabbalists and Hasidus tell us, that when you're able to get beyond the ego, when you're able to let go of Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, it's not all about what I understand, what I perceive, what I know, but you're willing to surrender to the humility of gratitude. Vatamoid miledes. Kabbalah always switches the order of words. It doesn't mean vatamod and she stopped meledes from bearing. Rather it means moledet. She gives birth to vatamod, to the height of prayer, which is amidah, which is absolute humility. See the twist of words? That can only happen when you're willing to go beyond, I know, I understand, I don't get this doesn't make sense. You're willing to start with the na'aseh before the nishma. I accept, and now let me understand. When you're willing to make Judah the foundation, so then vatamod moledet. You merit to give birth to the ultimate experience, the amidah, the total standing, the total humility, acceptance. Right? And you know what our sages say, right? The mind cannot encompass him, but the heart can. Him with a capital H. The mind will never be able to perceive God. For to know God is to be God. But the heart, humility, gratitude, acceptance, that can house God. Okay? Now let's understand what's going on here. The mystical secret, according to this teaching, the mystical secret of the first verse in our Torah portion, which again is the whole Haftorah, Vayigash Elav Yehuda. And Judah approached Joseph. Approached him, Joseph. According to Kabbalah, the understanding of that in mystical terms is hidden on the first few pages of Talmud. In Brachot, page 4. By the way, the Talmud starts with page 2 always. Most people don't know why. It's because the printers weren't Jewish. So the first page was the cover page. Thus the second page that's the real interesting, my research told me that. Okay, but why does it start with Daf Beis? My grandfather used to smile and tell me the reason why it starts with Beis, the second letter, is because when you finish the whole tractate, you should know that you still don't even know Aleph. That's what he said. But a little of history taught me a little different over here. Not that my grandfather's wrong, he's very right. But what happens here? On page 4, there's a discussion. And what it says is, you should bring close redemption to prayer. Let's talk about this. Here's a question about the Ma'ariv services, when you dive in the evening services. It's important to understand that what we call today prayer is not only prayer. Our two major prayers, the one in the morning, the one at night, not that Mincha is not major. The one at night actually, according to some opinions, is not even biblical, but I'm just sharing with you. When we do the Shacharis and the Ma'ariv, we're actually doing two commandments. Because saying the Shema has nothing what to do with prayer. Saying Shema is not a prayer, it's a declaration. Hear, O Israel, God is our God, God is one. And then God commands us to love God. And then God commands us to listen to His commandments. There's no prayer there. There's zero prayers there. So you should know that, what do we say? And you will say this when you lay down and when you wake up. We learn out from this, you have to say Shema twice a day. Now what we do is, our sages put blessings before the Shema, blessings after the Shema, and then goes the Amidah. So blessing, Shema, blessing is one commandment, to recite the Shema twice a day. Prayer is a different commandment. You'll serve God with all your heart, which is the service of the heart. This is prayer. So you understand there are two different commandments. Now the question is, why at nighttime do you have to put them together? Why can't you say the Shema, go home, do whatever you want to do, and then go say the prayer? The whole time limitation that the first Mishnah in the tractate of Brachot talks about is from what time to what time can you do the night Shema? Prayer isn't an issue. So the answer, the reason is so that you bring close redemption to prayer. What's that talking about? Because the closing prayer, remember I told you there's the blessings before the Shema and the blessings after the Shema. The blessings after the Shema talks about redemption. And thus, because it talks about redemption, you want to bring close redemption to prayer. Mystically speaking, this is the first verse of our Torah portion. Judah approaches Joseph. Joseph is what? Redemption. Judah is what? Prayer. So therefore, that's exactly what's happening. Prayer and redemption. So mystically speaking, that's the whole big secret of Judah coming to Joseph, that we're bringing together prayer and redemption. Again, redemption is the emotions. You shall love God, your God, with all your heart, with all your might, right? And then prayer is the acceptance, humility. No, come on, Phyllis. Ask me a question. Simple question. In the Torah portion, who's coming to who? Judah is coming to Joseph. What did the Talmud say? Bring close who to who? Redemption to prayer. Whose redemption? Joseph. Whose prayer? Judah. Isn't it the reverse? In the Torah portion, Judah is coming to Joseph. And in the what? And the Haftorah, they're bringing both together. But in the Talmudic ruling, who's coming to who?
Joseph.
For bringing redemption to Joseph. Why? What's going on here? You follow me? You with me? So for this, sorry, go ahead.
Judah needed to have forgiveness, redemption from Joseph.
Sorry, say that again.
Judah, being one of his brothers, needed to have redemption from the evil he had done to his brother.
Okay.
So he had to go to him.
Okay, but remember, we're kind of shifted into the realm of the spirituality of it all, the internal, the microscopic world. So I'm going to have to come back to what you're saying. Okay, because we're about to see that's quite the opposite.
Okay.
Judah is what makes redemption possible for Joseph. So it's actually, you're going to witness, but simply speaking, you sound like you're right. Judah's the one that needed the redemption, so redemption had to come to, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the interesting story. We're going to have to get to understand a little bit what happened when Judah approached Joseph. What happened when Judah approached Joseph? You know the story? He tells him, let me speak into your ears. So if you're going to give me just an extra couple of 2 minutes, I want to just read to you the whole conversation quickly and tell me what caused Joseph to have this great reaction. I can't take it no more, I got to reveal myself. Let's see what happens. So let's go through this quickly. Please, my Lord, let now your servant speak something into my Lord's ears, and let not your wrath be kindled against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servants, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have an old father and a young child of his old age, and his brother is dead, and he is left alone of his mother, and his father loves him. And you said to your servants, bring him down to me, and I will set my eyes upon him. And we said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father, for if he leaves his father, he will die, meaning the father. And you said to your servants, if your youngest brother does not come down with you, you will not see my face again, i.e., don't come back here for food. And it came to pass when we went up to our servant my father, and we told him the words of my Lord, that our father said, go back, buy us a little food. But we said, we cannot go down, only if our youngest brother is with us. We will go down, for we cannot see the man's face if our youngest brother is not with us. And your servant my father said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 children. Remember, Rachel only had 2 children. Joseph, who we think is dead, and Binyamin. The one went away from me, and I said, he has surely been torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. Now if you take this one too away from me, and misfortune befalls him, you will bring down my hoary head in misery to the grave. And now, when I come to your servant my father, and the boy is not with us, his soul is attached it means the father is attached to Benjamin's soul. It will come to pass when he sees that the boy is gone, he will die. And your servants will have brought down the hoary head of your servant, our father, in grief to the grave. For your servant assumed, now Judas is explaining, why am I the talker? I have 3 older brothers. So he says, for your servant assumed responsibility for the boy from my father, saying, if I do not bring him to you, I will have sinned against my father forever. Remember, forever, this world and in the world to come. So now please let your servant, let me, Judah, stay instead of the boy as a slave to my Lord, and may the boy go up with his brothers. For how will I go up to my father if the boy is not with me? Let me not see the misery that will befall my father. And what was the outcome of this speech? Yosef could not contain himself no more. What happened? What happened? What did Judah tell Joseph that he didn't already know? Joseph was part of this story. He just recapped him, sir, if you don't mind, let me remind you how this all happened. And all of a sudden Joseph falls apart. Simple question. Some commentaries say that the reason why he fell apart was because Judah just revealed to him that I put this world and the world to come on the line to bring my brother back. And if I need to go to war with you over this, we're going to go to war. Joseph says, wow, he did teshuvah. He learned how to treat a brother. It's done. That's what some commentaries say. Chassidus takes it to a whole new level. Remember how we started this whole conversation? The past. Joseph, with all his great intellect, could not get over the past. The pain of the past was not of the past. It was the present. Joseph sees himself consistently. I was away from my father for over 20 years. I was a servant. I was in prison. I still can't see my father. He couldn't get over the past. And what does Judah say to him? Here's a very interesting thing. Judah starts off his whole speech with, let me speak into your ears. Right? Let me speak into the ears of my Lord. What's going on here? This is Torah. This is not Shakespeare. Rashi comes along and says, yeah, you're right. This is not Shakespeare. So what's he telling us? Judah is asking Joseph, please allow my words to enter your ears. Joseph wasn't hard of hearing. What's going on here? Comes along Chassidus and says, Joseph, every reality has an external dimension and an internal dimension. The external dimension has manifested itself in great pain over 2 decades. You've been separated from your father. You've been a slave. You've been a prisoner. Your father doesn't even know that you have 2 kids. He doesn't even know that you're alive. There's pain here. But do you know that there's also an inner dimension of every reality? Where does the inner dimension come from? The source. What does the book of Lamentations say? Jeremiah says, Mipi Elyon, from the mouth of the one high above comes no evil. Every experience that happens, as painful as we experience it painfully only because we have the external experience. But on the internal level, nothing is bad. Nothing is painful. Joseph, open your ears. I beg of you, hear what I have to tell you. I want to reveal to you that nothing was bad. Now, mind you, Judah himself wasn't able to perceive that. He wasn't able to accept it. Do you remember what the Torah tells us? Right after Joseph is gone, Judah runs away from his family. He can't deal with the pain. Vayered Yehuda, he gets married, he has 3 kids, and he finds a girl. The girl marries the first one, he dies, marries the second one, he dies. He says, why don't you take a little hike and don't worry about my 3rd one. Let him grow up a little bit. Tomorrow, all of a sudden finds out that Judah's just planning to keep her locked up in her widowhood. So she gets dressed up. He doesn't know it's her. He gets her pregnant. She's now sentenced to death. Because how did you get pregnant if you still belong to my youngest son? If a husband dies without children, the brother has to stay connected. She takes out the things that he gave her as collateral and says, I just want you to know I'm pregnant from this man. Judah recognizes it. Judah has to make a quick decision. Be a politician and let someone else take the fall, or be a man. Judah was a man. Judah says, Tzotka hi mimeni. She is right. She's pregnant from me. She's right for what she did because I lied to her. She was meant to have offspring from my dynasty, and I was denying it to her. Thus she's carrying my twins. Only when Judah is able to work on his humility, only when he's able to be so humble to publicly admit what happened here, was he then able to finally pray to God, give me humility, give me acceptance, allow me to see the inner dimensions of reality instead of just the painful external dimensions. And thus Judah finds out that from these 2 twins comes Mashiach, Peretz. Therefore, Judah now goes back to Joseph and tells him, listen, there's a reality which you and I never knew about. Because all we try to do is use our minds. Our minds will never get to the inner dimension of reality. Only the external logical dimension of reality. And the logical dimension of reality is that it's painful what's been done to us. We've been wronged. We've been hurt. Why do we go through so much suffering? Why is there an accident in Mexico and another Jewish family dies? What goes on here? So Judah says that's because you're using your mind. I.e., I just want you to know, parenthetically speaking, I just want you to know that according to Kabbalah, Joseph's intellectual powers and spiritual growth is higher than our forefathers. Our forefathers had to protect their spirituality through isolation, becoming shepherds. Joseph was capable of not only maintaining his spirituality, but growing his spirituality in the heart of civilization, its egocentric ways, and he was the viceroy of Egypt, and he still remained spiritual. That's why when Jacob hears that Joseph is still the Joseph that he knows, what does he say? Rav, how great! Od beni chai, my son is still alive. He's still spiritually alive in Egypt. He's greater than I, my father, and my grandfather. And even all this spiritual greatness is unable to crack the outer shell of the painful external dimension of reality and connect with the superior inner dimension where everything is good. For God is good and God does only good. What's the only way that can happen? When Judah experiences humility, and Judah now prays for humility and prays for acceptance, he can absorb it, and he's the one to whisper into Joseph's ear. And he begs of Joseph, give up the egocentric logic. Hear me for a moment. There's a deeper reality than the mind can perceive. And in that reality, everything is good. In closing, it becomes crystal clear what we need to do if we ever want to break free of the painful past. You see, no human being is capable of logically understanding past the pain. We can't transform the past, and thus we're stuck in the past. And thus there's the rage, and thus there's the pain. We were wronged. We were wronged by God. We were wronged by the mazal. We were wronged by our parents. We were wronged by our siblings. We were wronged by our peers. We were wronged by our children. There's rage inside, because you're trying to see past it. Well, there's a reason. I don't know about no reasons, but if God is God, couldn't he do it without the pain? And it hurts, and the rage is there, and the mind's trying to, but I know that there's a deeper plan. I know I'm only seeing a couple of brushstrokes, it's the bigger picture, but it doesn't help. The arrogance of the mind, it just doesn't make sense. Why do we suffer so much? Who was it? Tom Hanks played that thing. If life is a life of cherry, the guy who walks and walks and walks, whatever his name is. Forrest Gump, right? What isn't that what the line is? If life is life is a bowl of chocolate. Yeah,
you
but
never
then
know what you're going to get.
But then there's the other line, right? If life is a bowl of cherries, why am I in the pits? That's pain. There's no way to intellectually get past that. The only way is to pray for humility and acceptance. Now, I want to share with you something. Let's be practical, because if this class we become, perfect, it's useless. No one's perfect. So let's be real. When you are in such a rage over the reality which you're only seeing through the pain of the past, how can you ever have humility? It takes humility to even pray for humility. If I'm so enraged and I'm so in pain, so I want to share with you a little secret that life has taught me, painfully so. It's amazing how after rage, you're depleted of energy, and there is a moment, a crack of humility. It's amazing how when you're alone, after rage comes tears. Am I the only crazy one here, or do we all experience that? When you're alone and you don't have to save face for anyone, when the rage finally blows over, there's tears. Carpa et diem. Capture that moment. That's a moment of humility. That's the moment that you can pray to God. God, please, let me out of the bondage of self, the anger, the pain, the resentment. Allow me to have your grace of humility and acceptance. That's how you let go of the past. That's how the present becomes the present, the future becomes the future. God is good, and God only does good. Thank you.
Yes.